I can't swear. I can't say any heresy. Okay, I can't insult anybody. Right. Okay. Right. Be good. Right. Got it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Aiko's Medley, the Eagle's Nest, the AM. Today, I've got Andy Brady with me, and Andy Brady is my pastor, actually. But I'll let him do the introducing. Hello, Andy. Who are you, Andy? Hello, and who are you?
I am the man with the big ginger beard. That's
We can see that.
So I'm Andy. As Aiko says, I'm a pastor, so she has to be very careful in what she says and what she asks today, because my ginger beard might just not want to answer it. But yeah, so I am a Christian. I'm a child of God. I'm a married man with two boys, beautiful Queen Grace.
Yep.
There are two boys. Eldest is AJ, Andrew Jr., and the little one is Nathaniel. And we have another baby coming on the way in October.
On the way. That is so exciting. Are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be. Like we have a mantra in Destiny Church where someone asks, "Are you ready?" and we say we were born ready.
Wow, I like that. I'm gonna take that. We're born ready.
But if I'm being honest, I was born an idiot, but I've been reborn ready.
I like that. Reborn ready. I like that. I think I've seen something on social media to that tune, actually. Reborn ready. All right, so Andy, you're on to talk about, help us make sense, of responding to racial injustice. I like that you are a pastor. I like that you are white. I like that you are a friend. I like that you've been engaging. So I want to touch on all these little points along the conversation. You're also a creative. You forgot to mention that bit out. Andy does the most amazing spoken words, and there's been a theme most recently. The color is black and white, sitting in a very calm background, and the tone is low. When you see that sort of mood coming, you just know it's something to do with racial injustice. So if you see those on his Instagram, click, it's about racial injustice. Tell us a bit about that, and you've been writing consistently about the racial injustice and the response. What has inspired that, honestly, Andy, to dig that deep into your creative side?
Well, I have a lot of black friends, a lot of black church family, but I also have black family. My wife is Congolese. So when we started dating, we experienced all the funny looks and people not sure how to act and what to say, probably from white friends and black friends. Mainly, if I'm being honest, mainly out with the church.
Okay.
But there was people were kind of little. It's a white guy and a black woman. Is that allowed? And
Wow.
I'm like, man. But so when I got married, like Gracie's family could not have welcomed me any more than what they did. So I had a child from a previous relationship before I was saved, and so AJ is 12 now. When we got married, AJ was, let me try and do the math, was 7 or 8 years old, and he was fully accepted as the first grandchild
of the family.
So none of Gracie's siblings had children at that time. One does now, but AJ was fully accepted as the first grandchild, and Mummy Mina, Gracie's mum, will hear nothing else. And I kind of mentioned this in another interview we've done before. We're not allowed to tell anybody, but AJ is Mummy Mina's favourite, right? So this is 2 videos I've now said this. So I'm like,
listen.
Like I said at the start, I wasn't going to get myself into trouble, but look, I'm already in trouble.
Listen, when one of the Queen's sisters hears this, your head will roll. Your head will roll.
So I never really faced any type of racism in my life growing up. I've had black friends, I've had Asian friends, I've had friends from all, but predominantly speaking, most of my long-lasting friends or those who I spend more time with were white. Okay. I grew up in Rutherglen, which is in South Lanarkshire, but we kind of like to say it's Glasgow, but it's not actually Glasgow. Okay. I grew up in a kind of gang culture. So there was a lot of stuff going on that wasn't good, but racism never really entered my mind because, predominantly speaking, most of my friends were white.
Okay.
So I never really experienced it or seen it so much. You've seen maybe you've seen some of the say, I don't like using this term, but the sense of humour would have been racist sense of humour.
Okay.
But it wasn't until I started to mature and say, wait a minute, that's not actually funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not that's not right. And I started becoming more and more uncomfortable with it.
Yeah.
And then as I kind of grew up and started having friends from all over the world, and also friends from Scotland, but who were a different race, I started saying, no, like racism's not a funny thing. Like that's not a joke.
Yeah.
And so it's always been something I've cared about. I'd never liked to see myself as a racist, but I had to really look into myself and go, okay, maybe I won't call myself a racist, but where are some of these thoughts coming from? Why do I think this way? Why do I speak that way? And I had to kind of have a good hard look at myself. And then being part of a church which has over 60, 70 different nationalities within the church, and also, again, a lot of British born people, but of a different colour from me, all part of the one family. When someone faces racism, it hurts because it hurts them. So that is why I've been quite outspoken. That is why. But really, the reason why I've spoke so much on it is because it hurts Jesus. Jesus doesn't like racism.
No, it doesn't.
I don't think when Jesus looks at his church, his bride, he looks to say, okay, well, I'm going to look at the white section of my bride and I'm going to just be happy with that. Or I'm going to just look at the black section of my bride and I'm just going to be happy with it. No, he sees his bride, which we're all together.
Yeah, agreed.
So if it hurts Christ, then it hurts me. And Jesus does speak about everything through his word. And he speaks out about speaks out about discrimination. So if he's speaking about it, his church must speak about it.
Praise the Lord, Pastor. You better preach. Woo! No Sunday sermon right there, honestly. That's beautiful. So let's go back to, I actually didn't think of this angle, but that's a beautiful angle. You are actually in a mixed race relationship. I think that can help us navigate this, because going forward, many of us are in mixed, not relation, but mixed friendships. Like many of us have white friends, many of us belong to workspaces where there's both black and white. So how did you initially approach that? Say you had, obviously her culture was different. Grace is all the way from Congo. How did you approach that? Did you have any questions about where you're from, about it's something you saw her, maybe the way she cooks, maybe a culture that you're from? How did you approach that side of things as a ginger man?
Right. I just want to say something before we start, because again, you mentioned food there, right? So you know me, we both enjoy our food, right?
Yes.
But and you may be inclined to think that it was Gracie's cooking that attracted me.
Was it not?
Right? You may be inclined to think that, or maybe the African cuisine was what attracted me to Grace.
Was it no?
But when Grace started realising she liked me, it's when she tasted my mum's cooking.
Oh, no way.
She tasted my mum. She tasted my mum's lasagna and she went, "That guy's a winner."
Oh, we need to get Grace on. What? So we lost our card. Grace, really?
But to be fair, she is a great cook and her food's amazing, and so is her mum's food. Her mum spoils me with food whenever. Oh man. Anyways, but yeah, so you asked about these type of questions.
Yeah.
Well, I had the fortune of being best friends with Grace for a couple of years before we started dating. And I actually said to her, I feel bad for the poor guy who ends up with you.
Did you? Wow.
Because I'm like, man, you're going to give this guy a hard time.
Oh, but that's not the Grace of back then. Grace nowadays is so soft and smiley. We remember Grace who was the man. But Grace is now soft and mom. So You've transformed.
But when we were friends, I was kind of interested. Like, she's my friend, so if you've got a friendship, you take an interest in them.
Yeah.
So I would ask her questions, so we would speak about, and we've got different friends and different mixed race marriages, mixed race relationships.
Yeah.
So I just ask questions, and Grace would be telling me stuff about Congo. She would tell me about her life growing up.
Yep.
So, but none of that is what put me off. It was why I felt bad for her. It was it was Grace's high expectations that.
It's all coming out now, you guys. This is the exclusive, okay?
I'm gonna get myself into trouble again here. Oh man,
exclusive. It's all coming out now.
But I'd never heard of a dowry or a bride price.
Okay.
I didn't know what that was. So when Grace started speaking about this, and I'm like, what? Like, so she had to kind of explain that type of stuff as like it's Congolese tradition that if you want to marry someone, you have to go to the head of that house. You have to ask permission first.
Okay.
Then there is like a dowry you have to pay, a whole bunch of different stuff. I hadn't heard of any of that before. So she explaining that type of stuff, so that was completely new to me, and it really intrigued me because, like, coming from Glasgow or Scotland, that's not something you would really ever have to do or know of. But again, when we started dating, so before I proposed, I sent a letter to Grace's dad. Wow. Because he wasn't in Glasgow at the time, he was back in Congo. So I sent a letter to Grace's dad to ask his permission and his blessing to marry his daughter, because that was the honouring thing to do. That's not something I would have done naturally, but because I took an interest in Grace and I knew this stuff, then I knew that she would never feel comfortable in answering the proposal if she knew the blessing wasn't already there. So I sent a letter, and Grace's mum had come back to Glasgow at that just afterwards, and so she was representing her dad. So I went out for lunch with Mummy Mina. I took her to the nicest. I heard she liked Italian food, so I took her to the nicest Italian restaurant I could find, and it wasn't great that day. And I'm like, oh no.
You could have taken to your mom's kitchen, Andy, okay? Your mom makes this fantastic lasagna. Come on.
So I thought, okay. But anyway, spoke to her. We had a really deep conversation. I'm very thankful that Grace's family is a Christian family. So it was always coming back to the word. It was always coming back to what is God calling me to do. So what was my plans, and everything was always brought back to Christ, which helped the conversation. I was still scared. I've grew up in a gang culture, right? So I've fought a lot of dangerous guys. I've been involved in a lot of violent situations. Even since I've got saved, I've preached to hundreds of people. I have never been as scared as I was sitting with Grace's mum in that restaurant.
Oh my God.
But again, she gave me her blessing on behalf of her father, and then it got started.
Wow. So you went deep into the culture. You were never afraid to approach the culture. It wasn't intimidating. Obviously, it was a safe space. Grace and her family are very safe space, very welcoming, very exciting.
It probably was intimidating in the thing that it was unknown to begin with. But the more I asked questions, the more I inquired, the more Grace told me, the more I got to know her family, the more I found the reason why behind stuff. So there was always a reason for doing something. There was always a reason for why the culture's like that, why we do things in certain ways, and that's the same for every culture. But you never know the why until you actually ask the question.
The question. That's beautiful. So let's talk about this. So I was telling you earlier about how I think from one of the results of this season is going to be a hypersensitivity on both sides. Black people have reached a saturation point where they're saying, every single question is a microaggression or an outright aggression. And then also on the Caucasian side of it may think, well, I don't feel comfortable asking questions anymore about cultures, about approaching the way you do things or asking about where you're from because of this specific season where people are saying most things are microaggressions and racism. Yeah. So how can you advise us about our relationships going forward? How are we going to navigate? Because I don't want to be a person who my friends can't ask me about my African background. I don't want to be the person who can't be asked what it's like to grow up and live in Africa, you know. I'd like to be approachable for my friends. I'd like to be a bridge between where people are in this country and Africa. If they want to go on a holiday, see something, I want to be the person who they can sit down and ask the most ridiculous questions. But that may not be the case anymore after this season. So how are we going to navigate that part?
So how do we deal with possible hypersensitivity going forward? Well, even before, so basically what kicked off this move of people speaking out against racism is what happened with George Floyd.
Yes.
Right? But racism was a problem before that. It's been a problem since.
Yes.
Hypersensitivity is the world we live in anyway right now.
Facts.
Like the worst thing you can say to you can do to someone of this generation is judge them. As soon as someone feels judged in this world, they completely shut you off, cut you off. They will not listen to a word you have to say if they feel judged. It's
called getting cancelled.
Man, like, so, so Destiny College, where I'm the acting dean, we have one of the assignments we have for our diploma in Christian leadership is how do you minister in a hypersensitive world? Right, and the thing is, people want to be understood. People want to be accepted, but it's not. It doesn't always work both ways, which is why hypersensitivity comes. But the question is, how do we respond without being hypersensitive going forward when people start to ask questions?
Yeah.
I think if the question that you're asking comes from a place where you genuinely want to get to know, then none of the questions can be really bad. So I think it comes with relationship. So you start to build a relationship up. I think it's so important for anything in life. Relationship's so important. So if I was to ask you a question, Aiko, about your upbringing, about your background and stuff, because we have a relationship, you're not going to see that as an offensive question. But unless it is actually an offensive question, but we have a relationship where you can let me know, that's actually quite offensive. So I think getting to a place where knowing where the question is coming from. So if the question is designed to build you up and not tear you down, then you can be in a safe place to answer that question. But also for me, if I ask a black person a question about their background or their culture and they get offended, I also have to give them a safe space to allow them to work through that and try and help them understand that the question never came from a bad place. It came from a place where I actually want to get to know you better. I want to understand what it's like for you growing up in this world. And I think I have a deep desire to see people walk in their purpose. Everybody, I believe, was created for a reason. Everybody was created for a purpose. So I actually have more of an interest of where you're going rather than where you come from. But in order for me to help you where you're going, I need to know where you've came from.
True.
So I think it comes from a choice. So if you get asked a question and it seems offensive, let the person know it's offensive. Explain to them why, and you will then know if that question came from a good place or not, because the person will respond in a warm way and not respond in an angry way.
Beautiful. I think that's very practical. So you're saying let's create safe spaces for each other, where people can ask and where you can respond calmly and from an understanding place. But I also hear you say conversation is important. Like, let's just engage each other in conversations to understand where everyone is from so we can move forward together, with an understanding.
So even when you look at the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
people had Jesus had conversations with people.
Facts. Jesus had conversations with people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But he would always give response based on what God says, not based on cultural opinions.
Yeah.
Right. So it was always bringing it back to truth.
Yeah.
Now, we're in a world where people don't want to hear truth because people's opinions and people's feelings are more important than what's actually true.
Yeah.
But if we're going to build anything solid, it needs to be built on truth.
Yeah.
So when we have conversations, you can have your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have your views,
Mm-hmm.
but if those views or opinions are based on discrimination or are based on something that's untoward, then what I would suggest is you need to be prepared for those views and opinions to be changed.
Yeah.
But they can only be changed when they're faced with truth, delivered with love.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I think that is it.
Yeah.
Truth delivered with love. It's okay. I can speak the truth to you. I go back and do it in a very condemning and hard way. Doesn't help anyone. But if I speak the truth with you, coming from a place of love, again, it's never to tear you down. It's always to build you up.
Yeah, I like that. And the fact that you're saying we cannot build on anything other than truth is important, because like we're saying, everything that starts out well and well-intentioned ends up getting infiltrated or hijacked, essentially. So we are in a culture that is transient, and we need the truth to remain a foundation, the same and strong and the compass, while other agendas try and take over. So that's
we've seen this with Black Lives Matters.
Let's get into that. Let's talk about Black Lives Matter.
Let's just jump in. Why dance around it? Let's
go.
Right
Let's talk about Black Lives Matter.
So, do Black Lives Matter? Yes, 100%.
Yes.
Do all lives matter? Yes, 100%. But if your first response to hearing Black Lives Matters is all lives matter, then you have an issue you don't want to admit. That. And you may say that's my opinion. You're okay to say that. You may disagree with me. That's okay to say that. But if Black Lives Matter, and we'll talk about that. You spoke about agendas before, so we'll talk about that in a bit. But for me to say a black person's life matters is not me saying that a white person's life doesn't matter. Right, and we need to get to that place where it's not one or the other. It's us all. But if my black friends, my black family are suffering for something, then I need to give them support at this time.
Yeah.
It's the same it's the focus comes to that. So I used the example of AJ and Nathaniel before.
Yes.
So AJ is my white son.
Yep.
Nathaniel is my black son. They're both my sons. Right? I love them both 100%. I love them both equally. I would give my life for them both. Right? But if Nathaniel comes up to me, now he's less than 2, so it's not as if he's going to come up and have this conversation just now, right? But if Nathaniel comes up to me when he can talk and says, Dad, I get really hurt today. Can you help me? The appropriate thing for me as his dad to do is to help him at that time.
Yeah.
But if AJ comes up to me and says, Dad, I got hurt yesterday and I'm going to get hurt tomorrow, going to help me, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to deal with those issues at that time. The appropriate thing to me says, AJ, those things do matter and I'm going to help you with them, but right now I need to help your younger brother.
Needs my help. That's beautiful. You're in a position that, you have one black son and one white son. So your the way you've explained that really helps people understand that the fact that if your son came to you and said to you, I'm not today, I'm disenfranchised, you have to focus on him that day, especially if AJ is fine. Not fine, but if AJ is not suffering that day,
Yeah.
I like that.
And it'd be the same if AJ came to me. If AJ came with an issue and then Nathaniel came for all the other things, I need to help AJ right there and then.
Yeah.
But back to this, what seems to be taboo thing called Black Lives Matter. Right? Black Lives Matter to me is not a hashtag. Right? A black life is not a hashtag. A black life is not a political agenda. A black life is a life.
Yeah.
There is not. There is a person there. There is a soul there. There's a spirit there.
Yeah.
There is someone who has been created there.
Yes.
Now, Black Lives Matter. I've been asked, do you believe in Black Lives Matter? I believe in the truth of that statement.
Yeah, that's me too.
The truth of that statement is Black lives do matter. I 100% agree with that. The Black Lives Matter movement or the political group, there are some things on that I don't agree with, right? But because I don't agree with the political agenda that may be overpowering the actual issue at hand, doesn't stop me from saying I love all Black people as I love all people. It won't stop me saying that. It may, like, it's like I see that political movement like every other political movement. You're never going to agree with everything.
That's how I feel. That's how I feel. I feel like here's a question I thought about. I thought, if Christ were here today, Jesus himself, do you think he would care about the fact that Black Lives Matter is infiltrated by they keep throwing this name around, George Soros, the Jewish billionaire? I don't, quite honestly, Andy, I do not think Christ would care, because he's the truth, he's the grace, he was incorruptible, if that makes sense. Not that he would go and join the other agendas, but for the fact that he would be fighting he would engage.
So
that's what I think.
Jesus always engages with truth, like I said. He would bring the word into the situation. So would he back an organization? No. Not if the organization goes against his word. But will he back a person? Yes.
Would he engage? I think that
he would engage. So if you look at the Samaritan woman, Jesus engaged. When you see the tax collector, Jesus engaged. Even with the Pharisees, Jesus engaged. He always engaged. So he never engaged and just says they're there. What you're saying matters. Now go on your way. He would challenge anything that was contradicting God's word, but he would always engage. And again, it was always to lead people forward or to help them be exposed to truth. So again, I think we have a lot of people have been too focused on political agendas that have tried to hijack the real issue, and the real issue is racism. And racism is a sin issue, and the only way you can combat sin is through Christ.
That is a good segue for the next question I have for you, Andy. So Christ is the truth, the way, the light. Agreed. The answer to racism is to preach the gospel. Agreed. Friday, a link came to me, and it was the link of pastors somewhere in England resigning for perpetuating racism in their church.
Okay.
So the pastors, it came a few weeks ago about how they had tried to prevent Black people entering certain spaces in their church because they wanted the church to look, appeal to the white audience a bit more. So I think it was things, I'll get the link, I think it was things like media, or basically like out spaces like media, or maybe I would imagine things like maybe ushering, so that the pastors didn't want Black people in certain places because they wanted the church to remain of appeal to a white audience. They wanted to grow their white audience. And then they decided, a few weeks later, which was last week, it was announced that they decided to quit. They decided to step down from the leadership. And what crossed my mind is the fact that racism existed in the church. This is not a small church. This is a sizable church, and the fact that would have been the hub of where the gospel is being preached, where we're saying, Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, where we're saying, we are one family in Christ, where there's obviously a multiracial. If you're saying that, white Black people shouldn't be here, it means it's a multiracial. Black people are there. How are we reconcile? I didn't know how to reconcile the fact that somewhere where the gospel that we're saying is the answer is being preached, people are still perpetuating racism. The interesting thing is that exact attitude is what brings about institutional racism in places like banks, places like the Home Office, places like Fina was talking about how, as a medic, sometimes people would refuse to address her. They'd address her white counterpart to give them the treatment. but she is also a qualified person. So that's the exact same attitude that's happening everywhere else that brings in institutionalized racism. And it was right there in that church here at not even one, two, a couple preventing Black people from entering spaces. So how do we help us reconcile what is going on here?
Okay. Well, I can't speak for that church because I don't know them.
Okay.
But for me, yes, Jesus called us to preach the gospel, but we've also been called to live it. So we need to live out the truth that we preach.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are preaching that Jesus came for the Jews and the Gentiles, which was the Jewish people who were the chosen people, the Gentiles was the rest of the world.
Yeah.
When Christ came, he came to make that come like that.
Yeah.
So when you have people from all nations in the world coming together, then you have to be inclusive for all, not exclusive for some. So my thing would always be back up what you say with actions.
Yeah.
So if you're preaching the gospel and you're preaching that there is no condemnation for those found in Christ Jesus, then there is no condemnation for those who have got a different skin colour.
Yeah.
And if we're prioritising people based on colour of their skin, then we're acting no better than the world that we're supposed to be set apart from. So my thing would be, your position is not based on your colour. Your position is not even based on where you've came from. Your position is based on what God is doing in you and what God has called you to do. So, like, for in our church, we have white pastors, we have black pastors, white leaders, black leaders. We have basically from all different cultural backgrounds from all over the world. Asian, Indian, so none of them are in a position because of the colour of their skin. They're in that position because that's who God's called to be in that position. But even in the world though, so there shouldn't be specialised positions for those in the business world or the educational world based on the colour of their skin. It should be who's qualified enough.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
And I think that's it. And even in the thing is about, like, that's why Christ is so countercultural, because he calls the unqualified. So,
facts.
But I know I'm not a pastor because I'm white. I'm a pastor because that's what Christ has called me to do.
Yeah.
My wife, she's a pastor as well. She's not a pastor because she's black.
Yeah.
She's a pastor because Christ has called her to be a pastor. So what I'd say for the church, and I can't speak about every other local church, but for us, you don't get a position based on your colour. Yeah. You get a position based on your character. And you get based on your character, based on your calling, and based on what God is doing in you.
That's true.
But I think again we have to learn. Again, it's learning if there is any institutionalized racism even within this church. I think over this past few weeks, it's forced us all as a pastoral team, as a leadership team, to really look into see what is actually happening. And I've been very blessed that people are willing to look now. People are willing to dig a bit deeper. People are starting to ask the questions and look for answers, because for a long time, racism, especially in the West, in this country, racism can be very subtle. Now, it's blatant in other places in the world, but it can be very subtle. But just because it's subtle doesn't mean it's any less harmful.
That's true. One of the things that the church has been saying, one of the responses that Destiny Church did say towards racism was, everyone search yourself. Search it. It's there. I think Pastor Andrew, he used the line, check yourself and see if there's an ism in every single one of us. And I think that's important to see, because I was saying to my friend yesterday as well, even within us Black people, we have isms. Yeah. We have colorism, we have tribalism, we have nepotism. Like, every single one of us has an ism that we need the word of God to help search out. Yeah. And as with that church, it's not about when they found out that this prejudice was there, they recognized it. And from what was being said, they've taken steps to address it. So it's also allowing each other to grow, you know. Yeah, as we search, as we're confronted with truth, let's allow people to grow. Let's allow that church to say we will investigate into our acts and look into what we can do to remove these isms.
I think it's the way you said, is let people grow. It's allow people to make mistakes and learn from them.
Yeah.
So I've seen there's some people who, even in this church, well, not even to do with racism, just general offence, where even when the person has apologised for the offence and looking to reconcile, the person's like, no, you've offended me now, that's it, I'm not interested, I'm leaving the church. That never does anybody any good.
Nope.
We need to have the bigger picture. So if I offend you, then I recognise that I've offended you and I come to you and I apologise and we start to reconcile, then the other side is now on you. You need to decide whether you're forgiving me or not. You need to decide whether you want to work with me or not. And you need to decide whether you want to reconcile. Now, it's not taking away how painful the offence was. It's not taking away the offence in the first place. But if someone has genuinely seen, what I did there was harmful and I regret it and I want to repent and I want to make amends, then I think the only way we're all going to move forward is if they try and make amends and move forward together. Reconciliation,
which is why I'm so passionate about the church being involved, because reconciliation, like, it's part of the program, justice, reform, and then reconciliation. And reconciliation, like you said, it's a set of things within us. It's the fact that, okay, we've gotten justice and the change has come, but reconciliation is in the heart. It's the fact that sometimes people are still bitter that you put me through this, that I had to explain to you that this has upset me, that you never understood, that I had to go through everything I went through to bring this reform about. So reconciliation,
Yeah, and that's what God does. God reconciles.
Yeah.
So we were all separated from God, but through Christ, through the cross, He's made a way for us to be reconciled to Him.
Wow, I like that. Before you go, I want us to talk about, I think we've touched a bit on the response about how all lives matter and Black Lives Matter, and you use the idea of Nathaniel and AJ. Let's talk about the other piece. You are not a hashtag. I think that that's a good finishing point for us. You are not a hashtag.
Yeah.
Tell us about that piece. What it's addressing, the heart of it.
So the reason that I wrote this was before I written, I think actually I wrote the blog and You're Not a Hashtag around about the same time.
Okay.
It's because I kept seeing political agendas or personal preferences kind of hijack the issue at hand from all ends.
Yeah.
And it's like I was seeing all over my social media page, or speaking about George Floyd, where he did this and he did that, or speaking about Black Lives Matter, well, they have this left view and they have this view and they support this but don't support this. And then the other side, people have kind of real extreme right views or right view, and they were saying about this, and I'm like, oh man, right, whoa, stop. Stop.
Yeah.
Breathe. It's very apt that the slogan of today is I can't breathe, because people need to take a breath.
Yeah, just too much coming.
So I wrote You're Not a Hashtag because it seemed like there was more focus on everything that was getting said around the subject of Black lives rather than the Black lives themselves.
Yeah.
So I wrote You're Not a Hashtag, You Are a Precious Life, because every Black person is precious.
Yeah.
And again, I say that, I don't have to say all people are precious.
Yeah.
There's no need for me to say that, because the subject we're speaking about is Black lives.
Yeah.
It's like when Jesus, when he was saying the Beatitudes, it says, blessed are the poor of spirit.
Yeah.
right? He never had to. He never had to kind of confirm that with "blessed are all people." Like, right,
Makes me laugh.
right, right. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
So, and I mentioned during the spoken word, some people go left, some people go right,
Mm-hmm.
all too extreme.
Yeah.
Christ-centered, that's the dream.
Yeah.
Because if you've got, and the reason what I'm talking about there is people with politically left views
Yeah.
and politically right views.
Yeah.
There'll be some in the left where there's some good bits there,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some bad bits.
Yeah.
Even with a politically right view, there'll be some good bits, there'll be some bad bits, but
Yeah.
none of it's perfect,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we want to move forward, we need to keep Christ at the centre.
At the heart,
That,
yeah.
again, so some are very liberal, some
Yeah.
are very conservative,
Yeah.
but you take anything and go extreme,
Yeah.
it's never good.
Yeah.
So Christ-centered is where, and that's why the reason why I was wanting to try and bring it back to being Christ-centered
Mm-hmm.
is because he's the only one that's going to change hearts.
Yeah.
He's the only one that's going to renew minds.
Transformation.
And if we keep, that's it, the transformation.
Yeah.
So I wrote, "You are not a hashtag," because you're not.
Yeah. I liked it. I saw it from the sense of, I think it's important for people people like me who are on social media 24/7. The language we speak is hashtags.
Take a break, Aiko. Take some time out.
Yes, but what I mean by that is that you can find yourself fighting over a hashtag, you know, and it's so unconscious. It just creeps in. You start defending a hashtag. You move away from the actual focus of, okay, we're talking about injustice and serious things. You start fighting over hashtags, and it's a distraction. And then with hashtags come labels, you know, hashtag this, hashtag that, hashtag this. So it was important to me that thing reminded me that the heart of that piece reminded me that, a hashtag. It's a hashtag is a means to communicate. It's not an identity at the end of the day. On social media, it's not something worth clinging to,
Yeah. I think, see, if you don't want to use a hashtag, don't use it.
You have to use a hashtag. Right. What do you mean?
So now don't use it. Right. Right.
I'm joking. What I mean by that is, this is the day of social media. If you're part of a conversation, you hashtag to be part of the conversation.
Yeah. Hashtags is what kind of connects the conversation.
Black Lives Matter, okay?
Right.
I've changed it, Andy. I've said Black Lives. I'm going to be using Black Lives Matter grassroots. So BLMG. So grassroots means local, just us, not Mr. George.
But the thing is, again, we could get in a whole political thing, which I don't really want to get in, because I don't think it brings any good.
Yeah.
But with certain hashtags, like I even said in the piece, that the hashtag was created, but the slogan became notorious. And the reason it became notorious, which was famous for the wrong things, was because of these political agendas taken from the side.
Yeah.
So if you're uncomfortable with certain hashtags, don't use them.
Don't use it, yeah.
If you want to use a hashtag, use one that you think says what you mean.
Black Lives Matter says what I mean.
Yeah. But so does Black Lives Are Precious.
That's true. So does Black Lives Are Precious.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the hashtags I use, is Black Lives Are Precious, because it's not something it's like any other agendas try to take hold of.
What happens when that agenda is taken hold of, though?
Well, I'll just stop you, because that's the thing. It's a long and winding road.
That's what I'm saying. It's a rabbit hole.
Distractions.
Yes. So just stick to one. As long as you know, I'm not part of me. As long as I know, I don't even know who George Soros was until this season. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and I think I'll stick to Black Lives Matter, dear all. But I mean it in the case of a Black Life Matters. I have no affiliation to political things, and no. Yeah.
And that's it. And you want to speak about the lives, because we want to see lives healed. We want to see lives change. We want to see lives transform. We want to see people moving forward together in unity.
Yeah.
That is it.
That's all.
And the church needs to be an example of that. So, but we need to show one another grace and give each other time to make mistakes, give each other time to get it right.
Yeah.
But always with the goal of moving forward together.
Yeah. That's true. I like that you're ending on that thing, that the fact that we need to give each other grace to move forward. Let's not be canceling people, the whole cancel culture where you say this and so you're done, you're mute, you're deplatformed and all that kind of thing. Let's give each other space to make mistakes and grow. Gives the fact that someone doesn't think that they are racist today or doesn't feel like they have a prejudice doesn't mean that they won't feel that way later. Let's give them the chance to grow.
That's it. Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
So if I was to get cancelled based on my mistakes, I would be gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm not going to, again, the cancel culture thing is another thing that's tried to hijack. Right. Like, rather than speaking about life, we were speaking about statues.
Yeah.
Rather than speaking about life, we're speaking about politics.
Yeah.
Rather than speaking about life, we're speaking about cancelling stuff.
Yeah.
It just, where does it stop? Right. So we need to take it person by person, day by day, and try and bring it into reality. And not being based on people's emotions or people's opinions or people's feelings. Let's base it on truth with love.
Amen. Woo! That is my pastor, you guys. If you are interested in attending the fellowship, West End Destiny Church, where we are led by Pastor Andy and his beautiful queen, who I've been trying to get a hold of, by the way, but it's another story. The queen was supposed to grace us with her presence over here at the Eagle's Nest, but she's like a bar of soap, a slippery little sucker. You think you have
You'll
her?
get her. You know what, right? Grace is actually one of my favourite preachers.
I've only heard Grace preach, I think, twice. That's not true. She preaches to me quite a bit in our one-on-one time.
Yeah, she does.
On a real though, yeah.
But I learned so much from my wife, and then even for Bible studies and insight and stuff like that, some of the stuff that comes from God through her, I'm like, whoa! But you put her in the spotlight, and she's like, no. But just keep pestering her. Keep trying to get her.
I will. I have everything that I will lock her down. I will. Right, Andy, thanks for joining us. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in our next medley. Bye.
Bye-bye.